All right, today's question on the fly is, should I marry someone with debt?
Ouch.
Maybe.
Yeah. I'm John.
I'm Jeff.
Welcome to Relational Media. This is a huge question, and I'm going to say that I want to approach this in several ways, and I'm sure Jeff has a way that he wants to jump into it.
Yeah.
But the first way I want to approach this is I want to ask a different question. Do I want to marry somebody who's made mistakes?
I like that.
Let us not assume that just because right now one of the things that we keep hearing is don't date somebody who has a lot of debt. There are lots of things that we are going to struggle with in life, both at the beginning of our life, in the middle of our life, in the end of our life.
Right.
It'd be really awful if I said, "Hey, don't marry somebody who has physical problems," or "Don't marry somebody who's overweight," or "Don't marry somebody," and we could go through a long list, right?
Right.
And people would go, "Oh, that's an awful thing to say."
Right.
But for some reason, currently, culturally today, one of the topics is that we want to avoid people who have a lot of debt.
Yeah.
So I want to start off with that idea. Yes, and I think it is important to recognize that when you marry somebody, you are bringing them in financially into your world. We've done a series on the question of should we keep our finances separate as a couple, and you might want to check that out because it kind of gets into the heart of that question is should I, in this relationship situation, absorb some of the financial commitments that somebody made prior to our relationship?
Yeah, I think, I want to answer this from my vantage point.
You bet.
Which is that, and I'm sure you're going to hear me say this in these little videos a lot. Like, you can't answer this question until you understand the meaning of debt to yourself and someone else. The meaning determines whether or not it's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if to me I'm completely phobic of someone else who has debt, the first thing I'd want you to do is ask yourself why. What's going on there? What part of your history, what part of your personality is contributing to your experience of that? And if you don't understand that, then how will you go about answering the question, is it okay to marry someone who has debt? You need to know who you are, and you need to know how your history impacts your present.
I think there's also the issue that, if you're asking this question, you're probably not saying, well, of course I should. You're probably either self-conscious about some debt that you carry, right. Or you're in a relationship with somebody who has some debt, and maybe you have some friends who are going, boy, that's a non-starter.
Yeah.
And I think really what it gets down to is if you are in a relationship with somebody who has assumed some debt, there's different kinds of debt. There's school loan debt. Obviously, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's accumulated a fair amount of school debt in order to pursue a career that almost requires that, mm-hmm. That's very different than somebody who may have accumulated a large amount of debt due to a gambling problem or some other deeper issue. That is also very different to somebody who's accumulated some debt due to medical issues, mm-hmm. or, quite frankly, an accident or something totally outside of their control. Yeah. So I think most of us have to recognize that life comes with surprises, and not all those surprises are good. And if we're going to go through a bad surprise, it's really a whole lot better to go through that with somebody. Yeah. And maybe this is something that if you're phobic about it, you can address it up front and say, hey, this is an issue to me. Can we work on getting through this or putting together a plan on how we're going to address this as a couple?
Yeah.
And just assume that it's something that is addressable.
I would say one more thing about this too. Like, if you're asking this particular question, is it possible that this question is a stand-in for another question that you maybe don't want to acknowledge? For instance, do I really love him or her? That's a different question. It's a harder question to answer, and it might be easier to say, oh, well, that person has debt, maybe I shouldn't marry them. Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder to say, I don't love them. or this is not the right person for me. So sometimes questions like this have, sort of two parts to them. One is the obvious, overt part of that question, and another is a covert one. Dig for, what you think really could be going on beneath the question.
And if you've watched any of our videos, you know that we're going to talk about, money in general, being that you need to know what's more important than money. And especially in some of these situations where debt has been taken on by an individual for circumstances outside of their control.
Yeah.
There are things that are more important than debt, just like there are things that are more important than money.
Sure.
And if you as a couple can discover those things and align the way that you use money in the future to those things that are more important, more often than not, that debt is something that can be jointly disposed of and can become an absolute wonderful mile marker of showing care and concern and the ability to accomplish a goal. So, the money isn't the issue. Building a strong relationship is.
All right, if you like our videos, please hit the like and subscribe button, because that's how we get this content to you in the future.
And if you have a question, if this has spurred some questions that maybe you want us to take a shot at, submit those. You can find them in the video description, and we will get to them as quickly as we can.
And as always, stay curious. That was a great end.